Everybody's smiling and happy. So we're going to do something a little different today. We've been going through this worldview series, and we spent a number of weeks talking about relationships from a biblical perspective, contrasted with a secular or cultural perspective. And as we went through friendships, we went through dating, we went through marriage, we went through parenting, all these key relationships, a lot of questions came up that weren't covered in the context of the sermon. And so people have been emailing those in, and so I'm going to do a little Q&A today. And I've got a few questions that are kind of pre-prep that I'll start with to give you some time. Then I'm going to open it up. And you get to ask whatever you want to ask today. And I will do my best to answer it from a biblical worldview perspective. Sound good? All right. So there were a lot of questions about the friendship, the covenant friendships, and what that means. And a covenant is an agreement between two people. It's a relational agreement between two people. There are some key covenants that we see in the Bible. The first is our covenant relationship with God. Covenants are different from contracts in that a contract is based on fairness or equity. So if I have a contract with I have a contract with the bank, they own the majority of my house, and if we stop paying our mortgage, will the bank let me live there? No. If for some reason the bank kicked me out of my home, would I keep paying that mortgage payment? No, because it's based on fairness. Two sides have to do whatever they agree on, and if one side stops doing it, the other side is free from the agreement. Covenants aren't like that. Covenants are more one way. It's an agreement to treat someone a specific way. And you're going to commit to treat each other a particular way. If one person stops being, 100% fulfilling their side of it, does the other person get out of it? No, because it's not about fairness, it's about faithfulness. When you get into a covenant relationship, it's an agreement to be faithful no matter what. Now, covenants can be broken. It's not, there are lots of examples in the Bible where covenants get broken, but that's not the intent. The intent behind it is to stay faithful no matter what. And the second most common covenant relationship we see is a marriage covenant. And this is really important. We spent a lot of time going through that about how a lot of the culture sees marriage as a contract. You do your part, I do my part, and we'll stay together. But if you stop doing your part and I start being unhappy in this, I'm out, right? That's kind of how our culture views it. A biblical worldview says, no, I'm in it for faithfulness. And understanding that there are going to be seasons where I'm just giving. Or I'm just receiving. Can I get an amen from my married people? All right? If you've been married for any length of time, you realize marriage is not fair. It's not fair at all. There's a lot of times when you're just giving. And if you don't think that marriage has giving to it, that means you're probably the receiving person and you need to up your game a little bit. And then we went off of that into this idea of covenant friendships. And we used the example of Jonathan and David as a kind of a model for that. And this is a friendship, again, that's based on faithfulness, a desire to be committed beyond normal friendship. And we saw that the culture looks at friendship from proximity, similarity, and convenience. So typically you have friends in school. Why? Because you're at the same school. Once you're no longer at the same school, what happens to those friends? You pick new ones at the new school. That's how it worked when we were kids. When you get to become an adult, it's work related, right? It's proximity. Once you have kids, you start hanging out with people who have kids the same age as you. You're friends with your kids' friends because it's convenient for rides and stuff like that. But once kids move out of that season, what happens to all those friends? I don't know anybody from my kids' soccer teams when they were younger. I don't know them. We haven't really cultivated friendships. We moved on from that season. When my kids go off to college, we're probably not going to be calling up their friends' parents saying, hey, you want to come over for dinner? Because that's the way our culture teaches us to handle relationships. So that's kind of just some background on covenant friendships. If you missed it, you can always go back on the app and listen to those. I think there were 4 of them. Here's the first question. Someone said, I see the need to have a covenant relationship with Christ and also my spouse, but am I called to covenant relationship with friends? Is that an essential part of the Christian life? And I would say this, covenant friendship is highly beneficial, but not essential. It's highly beneficial, but not essential. It's not a command to have covenant friends, just like it's not a command to eat filet mignon, but I would recommend it. You could leave covenant friendship off the table. You could go your entire Christian life without having any deep, meaningful friendships. Is that beneficial? I would say no. I think the Bible puts ideas out there for us that are inspirational goals for us to reach for. Just like being holy as God is holy. Do I know anyone that's as holy as God's holy? No, but does that mean we shouldn't strive for that? We shouldn't try for that? And so I think as we talk about covenant friendships, this idea of knitting your soul together with another person, I think it's something that is highly beneficial, especially in our culture where we're so mobile and transitory and compartmentalized. Think of a covenant friend is not a fractured friendship. And what I mean by fractured friendship is we tend to have friends at small slivers of our lives. So you might have a work friend, you might have church friends, you might have your kids' school friends, you might have workout friends, you might have camping friends. We have friends that don't span the totality of our life. And so they don't really know us fully. And that's the idea of a covenant friend, is to have a friendship that is more significant and spans a bigger swath of our lives. Kind of a tie-in with that is, are all friendships meant to be covenant friendships? And the idea here was no, absolutely not. Not all friendships should be covenant friendships. And the rule we threw out there was to be friendly towards everyone. Say be friendly. Turn to someone and say, be friendly. We want to be friendly towards everyone. We want to cultivate relationships with many, and that's that you're always trying to build new friendships. And I learned this from an early mentor of mine. His name was Woody Wirt. When I met him, he was 94 years old, and all he had was young friends. And I said, Woody, how do you get so many young friends? And he said, it's easy. All my old ones are dead. But he didn't stop cultivating friendships. He was one of those guys that when he met you, he would say, hey, let's get together sometime. And he was always trying to build friendships. Now, it doesn't mean that you're friends with everyone, even though you're cultivating that. You're trying to make the relationship better, deeper, but you should choose to be friends with a few. Proverbs 12:26 said, the righteous should choose their friends carefully, for the way of the wicked will lead them astray. And this is the idea that relationships, your friendships, have a big impact on your life. And so you shouldn't just bring anybody into your friendship circle. That should be chosen carefully as you're cultivating friends with many. Okay? And then you should covenant with just a few selectively. Covenant with just a few selectively. And the follow-up question to that was, if not, what are the distinguishing marks that differentiate a covenant friendship from a non-covenant friendship? And I'll go back to the example of Jonathan and David. The first thing we saw was they had a soul love for each other. It wasn't an ordinary affection that they had. It was a soul, deep in their soul, love and desire for each other's benefit that was not common. And so I said with the first distinguishing mark of a friendship that could move into a covenant friendship is if you have that soul connection, that soul love for that person, where kind of like the first time you meet them, that just clicked, and every time you're with them, it's just, I love that person. You know, I like my other friends, but I just love that person, that kind of soul connection. Then the second thing that we saw was a selfless commitment. A selfless commitment. Because of that soul love, they were willing to put each other first. It wasn't a friendship of mutual benefit. It was a selfless friendship where I just want to see the best for you. And then the third thing, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, so this is kind of a new thought, was they both had a sacred purpose. They shared a sacred purpose, and that was the glory of God and the advancement of his kingdom through the people of Israel. They both had a deep commitment towards this sacred purpose. They were men on a mission. They were warriors for the Lord. They wanted to defeat all of Israel's enemies and protect the people and see God's glory revealed in the world. And it was a lot of that sacred purpose that bound them together. One of the ways here at the gathering where I think covenant relationships, covenant friendships really make a lot of sense is with our home gatherings. It's with our home gatherings. And I think the best foundation for a home gathering is 2 or 3 people or a couple couples that covenant together to, hey, we're going to start a home gathering and we're going to be the core of that. And Ann and I kind of have that with Ray and Lisa. Where we just committed when, all through COVID, there was like a year where it was just the 4 of us gathering every week with just no one. But it was just sweet time when we were committed to do it every week. And it formed this really solid foundation for the home gathering to thrive as a result. And then coming out of our home gathering, all right, we had Bob and Joanne and Dave and Shelley and Dave and Lenora that all covenant, and Kelsey, that all covenanted together to say, we're going to be the core of this new group. And we're going to show up every single week, and that creates this foundation and this family for other people to find safety in. Make sense? Where they're not wondering am I going to be the only one that's here this week? Is somebody else going to come? There's that consistency. And I think those kind of covenant friendships are great starting places to build that practice in your life where you're not necessarily committing for life and beyond like Jonathan and David did, but maybe you're committing for 5 years or 3 years or something like that. To say, hey, let's do something sacred together. And we're going to be, this sacred purpose is going to be the foundation of our friendship for God's glory, and we're going to make sacrifices to accomplish that sacred purpose together. And that's where you maybe during that season, you may pass on an opportunity to move out of the county or something like that because you've committed to something more significant than just your own self-benefit. That make sense? So I think that's a great way. So those 3 things I think are the real marks of a covenant friendship: that soul love, that selfless commitment, and that sacred purpose. Now, a couple simple questions. To have a covenant friendship, does it need to be mutual? Yes. That's kind of the definition of a friendship, right? If friendship's not mutual and you're in it, you're kind of moving into Stalkerville. If you're kind of pursuing that and they're not into it, that's not really a friendship. And then the follow-up that is, should a covenant friendship be formalized, similar to Jonathan and David? That's what makes it a covenant. That's what makes it a covenant, is the formalization of it, is that verbal commitment to each other. That it's not just, we kind of like each other a lot, but we're not going to go there in terms of formalizing it. That's just a committed friendship. What makes it covenant is the formalization of it. What do you do when a friend you thought had a covenant friendship with stops reaching out to you, how far are you to pursue them? So this is a really good question, because I think a lot of people get their feelings hurt when they think a relationship is something that it's not. And so I have some insight that I want to share that I think will help you not get your feelings hurt as often in friendships. And that's to make a distinction between a covenant friend and a best friend. Covenant friendships are not best friends, where you're hanging out every day. You can have a best friend that's not a covenant friend. And you can have a covenant friend that is not a best friend. Covenant friendship is about the commitment to the faithfulness, that you can count on that person. I have friends that I love to hang out with that I don't really count on for much. Anybody got some of those? All right. And I would not pick them. They're fun to hang out with, but I wouldn't pick them for a covenant friend because they drain me for every penny I've got. A covenant friendship is willing to be there, to support, to count. And say, you can count on me. All right, when I was really sick, Ray came over. I think I told you guys this, and he gave me a big shot of something really powerful in my butt that really helped me out late at night because I was almost dying. And that's what a covenant friend does. They're there not to stick you in the butt. All the new people are like, we're never coming back to this church. This pastor's weird. Ray's a doctor. And he gave me a shot of something, some medicine that was too powerful to go in the shoulder. All right? Whew. You guys had to go there, didn't you? You had to go there. So, a covenant friendship is about the faithful commitment to each other. Jonathan and David did not hang out much in their friendship. In fact, because of circumstances, they went their separate ways a lot. They were both commanders. They had their own regiments that they went out and led. I've got some friends in ministry that we're covenant friends, that they would call me up and I would drop everything and go to their part of the world if they needed it. But we don't see each other maybe for years on end, but we are committed to each other because we're fighting this same battle together, and we're in it together, and we're there for each other if need be. Best friend is someone that you're seeing 3, 4, 5 times a week, that you have those expectations. So I think to not conflate the two of those is important. To not think that every covenant friend has to be your best buddy, hang out with you, do everything with you kind of friend. It's different. It's about the commitment, not about the overlap, the life overlap. And I think a lot of people get that confused, and that therefore they get their feelings kind of bent out of shape when they thought someone says, yeah, I'll be there for you, but then they're not there tomorrow. And they're not willing to go out for coffee the next day, and they don't call or text or write or anything like that. And I know. So that was kind of it for the covenant friendships, the questions that got emailed in. Does anybody have any other questions that you've got that may relate to friendship, to marriage, to dating, to any of those kind of things? Yes.
Have you ever experienced a situation where maybe someone wants a covenant friendship with you, or even a friendship, and it's just not something you desire? How do you approach that in a loving way, but also communicate your boundaries?
Yeah, probably go to a different church. No, just kidding. That's kind of the go-to, right? So the question was, if you didn't hear, the question was, if someone wants a friendship with you or a covenant friendship with you and you don't reciprocate, how do you handle that graciously? And I think honesty is the most gracious way A lot of times we're afraid to offend, and so we let expectations kind of hang out there because we're unwilling to say the real truth, that I'm not there personally. I'm full. I always use this example that my life is like a Lego brick. Anybody remember Legos when you were a kid or your kids? And if some people are you have a 2 brick, you have a 4 brick, you've got a 6 brick, then you've got like an 8 brick, and then you've got like those long 12 or 15 row bricks. Those are kind of how people are relationally. Everyone's got a different capacity for relationships. I'm kind of like a 6 to 8 brick guy. Nan's like a 24 brick person. And so she can put a lot more relationships in her life and not feel like she's not attending to those. Me, maybe I'm more like a 4 to 6 brick person. I keep my friendship circle small because my ministry circle is so big that I don't have time to really cultivate a lot of relationships. And so I'll tell people that, I appreciate it, but I would give them the analogy. I'm like a 6 person Lego brick, and my brick's full right now. I appreciate it. I love you, and I'm honored. But honestly, my brick's just full right now, and it wouldn't do you justice to say, yes, we can be friends in a significant, meaningful way when I know I can't. Right? And there are a lot of other people that you could bring. I think that friendship desire in your heart is awesome, and it's God-given. And there's somebody in the church or in your community that can be that has that same capacity right now to be friends with you. And I don't want to tie you up in a sense. That make sense? Okay?
Is that the same answer you'd give with someone interested in you romantically? Like, sorry.
No, I would give a totally different answer to that one. I didn't call on you, Kai. No. So Kai's question is, what answer would you give to someone who's interested in you romantically? This actually, when I was younger, happened when I was an intern pastor at Horizon. I had a couple women actually make counseling appointments with me to tell me that God told them that I was going to marry them. And I just say, hey, God didn't tell me. And so until he does, the answer is no. And I would say, I'm not interested in you. I don't know you. I didn't actually know them at all. And so I think on those situations, it's hard because our culture has taken friendship between men and women kind of off the table. And now it's, if you're any kind of friendship has to go romantic, especially when you're single. If there's any kind of connection, the assumption is we're going to start dating, right? If I think you're cute, you think I'm cute, and we like each other, that's an instant recipe for dating when you miss out on the entire friendship. And so I think if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm romantically interested in you, and you're not, you have to be really honest with them and really clear that I am not interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with you at all. And say it with a smile on your face. Everything goes down better with a smile, is more easily received. Don't say, oh, you're a great person, and don't soft pedal it so they think, well, they still kind of like me, right? I just need to pursue more. And ladies, this is particularly true for you. Because if a guy thinks there's any glimmer of hope, right, he will continue to think he's got a shot. And don't drag him on and on and on like, oh, we can be friends. You're like, no, you just ruined it. And my counsel is when somebody says, when somebody tries to take a friendship or an acquaintance into romance, they have altered the friendship. Here's my principle. Romance ruins every friendship but one. Romance ruins every friendship but one, and that's the person you marry. So if you want to ruin a bunch of friendships, go ahead and add romance to them and see what happens. And we all know that's true. I don't know anybody that has had a romantic relationship with someone that didn't end in marriage that ended particularly well. They don't typically make the invite list to your wedding, right? They don't, not somebody that, hey, we just got married. Hey, let's have all my girlfriends over for dinner 1 week after for the next 6 months, right? That doesn't typically go well. So my counsel is don't put romance into friendships unless you feel like this person is potentially the person I want to marry. And you're only going to know that if you have built a friendship with them over time. That's the best way to set yourself up for marriage, is to have great friendships with members of the opposite sex that never get into romance. And it's great practice for faithfulness once you do get married. If you're in the habit of following through on every attraction you have, that sets a dangerous precedence for you in marriage, because that's what you're used to. If you feel attracted to someone, you're practicing, I'm going to follow that and disregard the fact that I'm not married to that person, and I'm going to go pursue them romantically. Now, I will say this. This is another thought for you ladies, that if you are dating someone and you've been dating them 6 to 9 months and they haven't proposed, they won't. Unless you stretch it out for like 8 or 9 years until they get to the point where, like, I better take this one or I'm going to be out of luck altogether. Most guys, unless you're, 18, then probably not ready. You shouldn't even be dating. If someone has been dating for 6 to 9 months and the guy isn't pulling the trigger, you are just a placeholder. That's the truth. And you'll see this time and time again, where a guy's been dating a girl 2-3 years, won't propose. Everyone thinks he's got commitment issues. They've broken up 3 or 4 times, gotten back together. They finally break up for good. He meets someone else and he's engaged in 3 months. It wasn't that he had commitment issues. He just didn't want to commit to that girl that he was dating. She was just convenient. And so here's my advice for you ladies. If you're dating someone and 6-9 months have gone by and he's nowhere near proposing, run. All right, just get out of it, because he's not probably interested in marrying you and committing to you in a covenant relationship for the rest of your life. Especially if he has a job already and he's got a place and his life's pretty secure and he's mature. Guys know what they're looking for, and they'll pretty much lock it up. Guys are afraid of losing a good thing. And if you're their good thing, they're going to figure out a way to lock that up pretty quick before somebody else comes along and snatches you. Okay? Yes?
Okay, so in covenant marriage and dating,
Which one, marriage or dating?
both.
Okay.
You can differentiate the two, but I think you've talked about this in one of your sermons, but having relationships with the opposite sex. So like you having a covenant friendship with a female, or her having a covenant friendship with a male, and the difference between whether they're couples together or singles, and whether, like, wisdom on that.
So when you're married, I'll take the marriage part of that. When you're married, your primary covenant is with your spouse. That's the deepest relationship, the most significant relationship. It's the only lifelong one that the Bible doesn't say till death do you friends part. It says that with marriage. So marriage supersedes every other relationship. When you're in a covenant marriage, that's your new context. And so you need to stop thinking of singular friendships, because you're no longer singular. Every friendship you have impacts your spouse, even ones with the same sex, right? Even women to women. Those friendships now impact your husband, especially if they're gossip friendships, right? Where you're you know, complaining about your husbands to each other and venting about them and things like that, those negatively impact your marriage. And so you need to choose those friendships carefully. And the ideal is to have couple friends where you're not having, and I wouldn't recommend that any husband has covenant friendships apart from his spouse with a female. I think that's just dangerous and dumb. And and any wife that's okay with that needs to have a talking to as well. So I think you want to protect. So I always think of my marriage as having hedges around it that keep out certain people, right? I can talk to Lisa across the hedge, but she only gets to come in when Nan's there. That makes sense? And so that's the protection in the relationship that keeps it the priority there between husband and wife. Did I answer your question? Okay. Yes. About what? Business friendships. Yeah, business friendships are fine. I think you always have those kind of friends. That's going to be more probably more of a secular mindset for most people, where they think of the business as being equitable. You know, business should be equitable. I think the challenge with being business partners with a Christian is that you're committing to a higher standard where you're willing to, if you commit to a business partnership with a Christian, then you're committing to keep the relationship at personal financial cost. That even if it doesn't work out for you, Bible says that Christians shouldn't sue Christians, because we're supposed to value the friendship above the business. And so if you're going to commit to a business endeavor with a friend, realize that the friendship is still the most valuable thing. And the money, the business, the assets never trump the friendship, and you want to keep that friendship at all costs. No, that's an easy one. Come talk to me. We'll have a come to Jesus moment. Guys, you have to respect the women and realize that if you've got them locked up in a dating relationship that you are not thinking is going to end and is not going to get to the beginning of a marriage, you are disrespecting them because you are keeping them from the man that will commit to them. And that has got to be one of the most selfish, evil things you can do to a woman, is to lock her up when she may have already met the guy that would be willing to commit, but he's not going to because you're dating. And so I would say to guys, don't date until you're ready to marry, and where you think that this person is actually a solid candidate. I can see myself marrying this person. If you can't see yourself marrying that person, you shouldn't date that person, and you should be man enough to call it off today. All right, got time for a few more questions. Any other? Yes.
So Reimagine rights was in this series, right?
Correct.
So I kind of struggled with that. Just I was convicted and so forth, just because the roots of our country, our forefathers were godly men and women who struggled, and so I don't want to just like give up and roll over and say do whatever you want in whatever school, blah 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 blah. So can you address that? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I struggled with surrendering my rights as far as being an American and wanting to hold those values of my forefathers.
Yeah, and that all comes back to who are we patterning our life after? And if we're patterning our life after Jesus, he is the model for giving up your rights. When he was being tried and convicted and about to be sentenced to be crucified, Pilate said to him, "Don't you know that I've got the right to kill you or set you free?" And Jesus looked at him and said, "You've got no right over me. If I wanted to, I could ask my Father, and he'd send a legion of angels and wipe you all out." He said, "No one takes my life from me. I willingly lay it down." And I think that's the model that we should follow as Christians when it comes to our patriotism. And I think we misunderstand how the forefathers approached setting up this country. They all died penniless. They gave their fortunes, their reputations, made great sacrifices to ensure that people could have the freedoms that they cherished. They willingly gave up all their rights to make life better and to glorify God in the process. I think we've lost sight of that, and we think that the rights are something that I deserve, something that's my privilege as an American, and I should stand up for my rights. And I think as a Christian, a biblical worldview is I should lay down my rights to benefit someone else. That's the higher calling. That's what, if you want to use that term, "Make America Great Again." I know that's gotten so much politicization, but it really resonates with conservative Christians. If you really wanted to make America great again, you'd be asking yourself, how can I sacrifice for that? Not how can I protest it, how can I rebel against it, how can I stand up for myself, but how can I stand up for the person who can't stand up for themselves? How can I help the person that is helpless? How can I be a voice for the voiceless? How can I really champion those who have no champion? You want to make America great? Get into something like human trafficking and make a difference there. You want to stop abortion? Adopt a child. Those are the real sacrifices. It's great to put a tweet out there or post something on Instagram, raise your fist in defiance. When you want to make a difference, you adopt a child. That's going to take sacrifice, and that's going to change a life. And if the church was willing to adopt every unwanted pregnancy, I think we'd see that would have a significant impact on what the abortion rates are in our country, because it presents a different kind of alternative. And we're going to do, starting in 2 weeks, we're going to wrap up this series by hitting every hot topic in our culture. So we're going to talk about gender, we're going to talk about abortion, we're going to talk about racial reconciliation, we're going to talk about social justice, we're going to do all the hot topics, and so we'll get into some of those. But does that answer your question, Shelley? Yes? Okay. Or we're going to have lots of empty seats because everyone's going to hate me. All right, we take one or two more questions. Oh, right there? Breaking a covenant. So Oh, okay. So the question was, given that covenant friendships are not transactional, are there any biblical grounds for breaking them? God's heart is that covenants would be kept, not broken. That's always his heart. There are reasons why covenants are broken, and there are things that we do to break them. So you think about it, the most simple one is that if covenants are about faithfulness, how do you break a covenant? Being unfaithful. Sometimes covenants get to a place where they are irreparable between human beings. Jesus said that when that Moses allowed people to write a certificate of divorce, not because it was God's intent to give them an out, but because of the hardness of their hearts. And that's really what I did how many years ago, we did a You Asked For It series, and one of the questions that got asked was to talk about, what does the Bible say about divorce and remarriage? And as I did a deep dive into that, I made this statement that got a ton of controversy in emails afterwards, and that is that divorce is not a sin. Nowhere is divorce mentioned as a sin in the scriptures. Divorce is the result of a lot of sin. It's kind of the end of the road of a lot of sin. You got to sin a lot against each other to get to divorce. Divorce is simply a finalization of we've sinned against each other so much, our hearts are so hard, there's no chance for reconciliation anymore. That's not God's heart, but God understands that sometimes happens. And divorce was given in that culture as a protection for the woman, not as an out for the man. Because in that culture at that time, if a woman was not wanted by her husband, she was simply kicked out. And then she had no legal standing in the community. She couldn't go back to her father's house because it would shame the father. She couldn't work. She couldn't own property. And most of the time, it forced them into a life of prostitution to find some means of supporting themselves. And so divorce was never God's heart, but a protection to give the woman a legal standing to get remarried. That make sense? And so there's not really any justifications for breaking a covenant in the scripture as much as there are explanations of why they get broken. So God's heart is always reconciliation. He always wants to reconcile. He wants to reconcile with us. He wants us to reconcile with each other. And he never wants us to get to that place where our hearts are so hard that we're unwilling to forgive and move forward. Okay. All right, one last question. Nobody wants to be the last question. No? Yes.
Speaking of covenant friendships and marriage, you mentioned that married people should try to become friends with other married couple because it influences their marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question now is, so imagine a scenario where a lady was friends with another lady, and then that was a covenant friendship. What happens to their friendship when this lady becomes married?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. So the question is, what happens to a covenant friendship between two women or two men when they get married? And now that marriage covenant supersedes all the other covenant friendships. I think a couple of things. You can try to bring that friendship into the marriage. You don't want to have a friendship that is exclusive of your marriage. I think that's always dangerous. When to have a friendship that's not a part of your marriage. You haven't brought that friendship in. Nan has some covenant friendships with some girls from college, and they've all become my friends. And we've had them over to our house. We've been to their houses, even though their husbands aren't kind of weird, but I don't get along with them super well. We work at it because those covenant relationships are important to her. And so I want to make those a part of our marriage so that those friendships can continue to grow and to thrive. And I think that's the ideal. If you've got a friend that is unwilling to be friends with your spouse, it's time to move on from that friendship, because that's going to be a potential divisive point between you and your spouse. Okay? Yeah? All right. Oh, Jared just walked out. Oh, there he is. You ready to close this out? He's one of the... No, Jared's an awesome friend. He and Kelsey have been so faithful to me and Nan and the church and to you guys. They're a real blessing. Amen. Let's go ahead and stand and let's close out in prayer. Father, thank you for this time where we could just have dialogue as a church family and look at some of these particular questions that have arisen out of the principles that we've been studying. And Lord, I pray that if there's anything that was just from me and not from your heart, that you just make people forget it. And the things that are from you that genuinely characterize your heart for us, that they would sink in and stay deep in our souls. We just want to live in a way that's glorifying to you. And so, Father, we ask that you would take our lives and keep them in that biblical lane. Continue to shape our understanding of the culture we live in, not from its perspective, but from your perspective. May we make choices in life based on the eternal truth of your word that cuts across every generation, every social context, every nation, every creed, every race, every season in history. Would you give us that rock-solid assurance that we are standing on your word and we are living lives that are glorifying to you. We trust you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.